Future Now Show. Brought to you by the Club of Amsterdam.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Future Now Show. Today we discuss sustainable development, and we are very pleased to have with us Mr. Tom Bosschaert, founder and CEO of Except Integrated Sustainability. A warm welcome to you, Tom.
Thank you.
And I found out that we both love the same snack bar, which is Bio in Laren.
Oh, excellent.
So we both grew up in the same area of the Netherlands, and yeah, I hope you can still find time to visit Bio one more time, or
I certainly do on occasion. It's not too far from my house, so
to have the Dutch croquette, or which is your favorite snack?
I very much like a kaas soufflé.
Ah, the kaas soufflé. Okay, wow, cool. With satay sauce, or?
Oh, no satay sauce. No,
Okay.
That's not for me.
Okay, let's jump into sustainable development. I read somewhere that your motivation for studying at Yale was to find out what fundamental sustainability is. Did you figure it out?
Well, I wrote a book about it, which is only 450 pages long. So I'm not entirely sure I did, but I did find an answer to the questions that I did. So yeah, it's true. So I studied architecture and urban planning at the Yale School of Architecture, but because I already had a master's degree in industrial design, I had a lot of space, and I used that to work together with the School of Environmental Studies, who are the pioneers of industrial ecology, which is really the science of sustainability. And I worked with the professors there to get my fingers behind the question, how can we use an integrated systemic approach to look at sustainability and make it a practical, applicable framework that we can use to innovate, to go faster towards a sustainable future together. And that has become the Symbiosis in Development framework, which that book is about. Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit more about this systemic development? Systemic, sorry.
Yeah, sure, I'd be happy to.
What is it?
It basically, it really started from, in the first years when I started the company, we wanted to do what we are now doing, but we didn't really find the words for it yet. It'd be so great if I could go back in time and tell myself when I started a company, use systems thinking and use systems thinking's frameworks to arrive at your innovations. But I wasn't there yet. At the time when I started the company, I was 19 and I was studying industrial design. And I was working on some projects which are mostly had to do with energy saving. So we're talking about 1999. So that's really when the word sustainability was still only in very niche corners of society's conversation. But there was environmental friendliness, and there was some idea about energy reduction and so on. So I worked, for example, on a project with a big housing corporation, and we set up a massive program to replace traditional light bulbs with power-saving light bulbs, this also called CFL, compact fluorescence, the one made out of glass. And we worked for a year or so on that, and we managed to, I think, promote more than 300,000 of these light bulbs to be replaced in the city of Rotterdam and its surrounding areas in different housing corporations and things like that. So that felt like a large success. But then a year later, I discovered that those power-saving light bulbs, if they are not disposed of in a very particular way and they break, actually the mercury gas in them can leak out, and it has a very large negative effect on the environment. So what you're really doing with this is you're trading energy efficiency for environmental pollution. And not any environmental pollution. We're talking about mercury poisoning, which is one of the hardest to get rid of within our ecosystem. So naturally, I felt really bad. I felt terrible for having worked so hard on a project that I thought was so great. But if we had only waited a few years and done the program with LED lights instead of those CFLs, we would have had a much better result. In fact, it would have been better if we had done nothing at all. And so from that moment, I started to realize, you know, we could have known this if we had done our homework well. You know, so you go forth with the best of intentions, but of course, you know the expression, the road to hell is paved with the best intentions. And so started seeing a lot of these projects that are well-intentioned and they have the word sustainability or environmental friendly or socially just or something connected to it. But if you really look at what they're doing, they're often either not doing what they say that they are, or they're causing even an adverse effect. So because of this, I thought, okay, a more systematic approach is valuable as a tool. So I started looking around to see if there was anything that we could use, and there wasn't really, not for the kind of integrated projects I wanted to do. So I started work on making that framework. It started small with just a categorization system, which you now call LC, which stands for energy, materials, life, society with economy and culture, and the individual with the health and happiness of each person. That if you think about these aspects together, you're already really covering a broad base. But then over the years, it was expanded with network theory and proper systems thinking theory about system dynamics and an entire practical work set around it, as in, okay, so how do you create a team? How do you instruct a team? How do you plan this in time to do a systems analysis and then execute it so that you have a manageable project? Because systems thinking can get out of hand very quickly if you don't put clear procedural boundaries on what you're doing. And that methodology, symbiosis in development, SID, as we say, SID, is now the main engine of our entire organization. It's used by various universities. There are other consultancies that use it a lot because it's an open source and free framework for people to use. We're still developing it, but there's now also video training online and workshops and things like that. But it really just started as a need for ourselves, and then it became larger than we are ourselves. So it's a spin-off of what we've been trying to do, but a really important one. We're now moving to the next step in that we're going to be developing some pieces of software that help with working with multiple partners on one project, on being able to do a systems analysis on the energy and material flows of any project, let's say a city project or a factory or a supply chain of an organization, or you know, the systemic effects of doing an interregional ecosystem project or whatever it is, almost like putting together Legos, so that people with a non-technical background can actually participate in the process and can exchange data and lessons of how systems interact together.
So this is an invitation for tech companies, or?
We currently found the funding to make the first prototype. So hopefully near the end of next year, we have a properly tested and running prototype up, and then we will be publishing information about that. So for now, we're good.
But explaining all this, I'm expecting you and your company to become an IT company. But when I look at the current team or at vacancies, I don't see software development or engineers, data engineering or artificial intelligence in the list. How are you going to manage all this?
Yeah, so Except Integrated Sustainability really is a consultancy for organizations that want to take the next step in sustainable performance. So we consult companies like Heineken and IKEA and other large multinationals, often in relation to food or complex supply chains, on creating transitional models to become part of a future-oriented sustainable society. I think we're the first in the country, at least, if not in Europe and the world, to start doing this kind of stuff. And then secondarily, we work on city design and building design to help the built environment, but that includes industrial parks and things like that. That's going well, and except as an organization needs to continue to do that. And if except also becomes the software developer, then we've got too many plates up in the air. So what we're doing is we're creating a new company called Simoto for system modeling tool. And we are working in partnership with two software developers, one in Vietnam and one in the Netherlands, because we have an office in Vietnam. So we would like to involve the international community in the process. So that's why you don't see that on the except website, but it will be basically published somewhere else.
And it was also in Vietnam that you won an award for the most innovative project. Was that also the starting point of building this close relationship with Vietnam, or is there another motivation for it?
Yeah, so that's an interesting question. Why Vietnam? To us now, in retrospect, it's very logical. But if you would have told me like 3 or 4 years ago, I would have also been, well, that's quite random. Why Vietnam? So as I mentioned, we do these projects as consultants, kind of like strategy and design things. But it's been more than 20 years. So we've done, I think, more than 700 projects now worldwide on more than 30 different countries. And that's been absolutely fantastic. But we all know, you know, I know, the listeners probably know, that we are not making a lot of progress as a society towards securing a long-term sustainable society. We need a lot more than what's currently being done. So instead of waiting in a passive sense for us as an advisory organization for the question to be asked, we have always been entrepreneurial in that we have created our own projects. So, for example, a good example is the eco community, which you see in my background, actually, where our office is. It's a fully self-sustaining and circular office building that is a renovated heritage industrial building in the city of Utrecht that brings together about 180 different sustainability professionals that work together in one community. As a building, it's exemplary with hundreds of plants and indoor trees and a high quality of natural daylighting and circularity and health and energy efficiency and things like that. But as a community, how these organizations work together and the projects that they do is much more powerful than the building itself. So that's one of our own projects. So we've been puzzling together the different pieces of a truly self-sustainable urban environment, and that's what we call Orchid City. And Orchid City we started work on about 3 years ago. We invested heavily ourselves as a company, basically all of the money that we had for years of research and development, and created a partnership model where now more than 25 different companies around the world are part of that model, and each one has a little bit of a puzzle piece to complete that big puzzle of how to create a self-sustaining urban environment. But we created a model, and now we are looking for locations to actually go and build them. Because we do believe that we should skip over the period of just having a little pilot project here or a little test over there. All of the things that we've collected have been proven already. It's just they're being put together in a new way to create truly affordable and entirely self-sufficient city models. So we were scanning around the world, where should we start? Now we picked, of course, the Netherlands as one of the places because we're here, so we have a lot of connections, but the Netherlands is also very full and old, which means that a lot of land has a lot of layers of complexity, even from a policy perspective. So the result of that is that it will be slow. we are talking to the city of Almere now and working with them to apply some of these Orchid City principles to some of the new neighborhood designs. So that's great. But we needed to find a country where there's a lot of space, that also has a real need for high quality, affordable, sustainable housing. We needed a country that would feel the effects of climate change quite strongly. Vietnam is in the top 5 of countries that will be hit by climate change due to changing weather patterns and rising seawater level. And we need a country also where there was an understanding of the need for this, as well as a supporting workforce that was basically highly educated and motivated. And we found all of those things in Vietnam, wow. Which is absolutely a marvelous country that I've learned to discover in the last 3 years together with the team. And each time I go back about 4 times a year now, I discover new and remarkable things about the Vietnamese culture, the Vietnamese people. And also we've been embraced by the community there. And so we are building long-term partnerships to truly realize several Orchid cities, both combined with industrial production. So we actually really, I mean, we're talking about a city that isn't just for living. It's all of the jobs that are necessary are also included in that self-sufficiency. All of the food is created within the city. And I'm not talking about just greenhouses that grow a lot of tomatoes. I'm talking about agroforestry, permaculture, we're talking about silvopasture, we're talking about food forestry and aquaculture, all of these different layers of sustainable agriculture put together in a symbiotic system that then also works like a wastewater treatment facility, water buffering, and climate adaptation system. So we're putting all of these things together and we're layering them, and we're coming to the conclusion that if we do this, for every inhabitant that lives there, compared to the average Dutch carbon footprint, we're 140% better.
It's amazing.
Yeah, so that means the city as a whole actually secures 40% of its own usage for another city. So it's carbon positive in that sense, wow. Or carbon negative, you know, confusing those arguments. But it's, yeah, so in terms of carbon footprint, it's hugely beneficial. It's affordable, so more than 30% of the housing is affordable. And we're really generating a local economy, which can also happen in a rural area. Because you're creating jobs, you're actually creating the destination for the city inside of the city itself, which is a very healthy way to look at also rural revitalization and things like that. So yes.
Is Orchid City in Vietnam, is it the project you are most proud of out of all the projects that you have done in respect to sustainability?
Yeah, it's always like, what are your darlings?
Name one.
I'm exceptionally proud of Orchid City because it's the accumulation and the pinnacle of everything that we've ever done. However, it has not yet been built, and that will take years to realize Orchid cities really. So this is all master planning stage and funding stages and things like that. The project we did for IKEA, where we built a strategy for IKEA to use the catalog. You know the IKEA catalog. You may have one somewhere. Yeah. So the IKEA catalog is such a great project because it sounds so silly and innocuous, but we were able to change the entire world's printing and paper production system with one little project. And to me, that exemplifies the power of systems thinking.
Cool. If you had to choose between the Vries project and the Detroit project, which one would you pick out to?
Yeah, so Detroit is in the past and Vries is largely in the future. I think Vries, Vries, which is the working title, is a joint collaborative effort of many different organizations working together, among which Cambridge University, Edinburgh University, where basically it's a long-term project. We are moving towards realistic implementation of global cooling principles, where we make an effort using the stimulation of natural processes without using any chemicals or anything like that, allow the cloud cover over the Arctics to be increased, allowing for more sunlight to be reflected, which would in the long term buy us about 50 to 100 years of slowing down the climate change process. So that's quite a massive project. Mm-hmm. And if it's a huge victory in our attempts to transfer towards a sustainable society in a more paced off way, to really reduce the negative effects of climate change that we're all going to be experiencing in the next 50 years.
It's blowing my mind. It's huge, but I was wondering how to avoid a Western world perspective on sustainability in all the projects, or in any project you are doing. Our starting point maybe, or very well could be, our Western European view on how things should be, but it may not match the other cultures see their future. How do you cope with that?
Yeah, that's a very good and interesting question, because you can be so blind for your own bias, right? That's just inherent in being a human on this planet, no matter where you're from. There are several things that we do actively to try to prevent that bias. And there are several things that come naturally with the way that we are organized and that we organize our processes. That's not to say that we're perfect, but we do our best. The first thing that immediately comes to mind is that we have a highly active policy of diversity within our organization. So we're currently with about 25 people, and I think we're from 18 or so different countries, spanning from Indonesia and India to the Middle East and Iran, to Eastern Europe, Western Europe, North, South America, Africa. So we have a very global community of people that are working on things. That's one that's very important. It has more advantages than just this. For us, it's very important to also have a diversity in political mindset, in age, in capacity. So we have technical people, we have highly non-technical people, we've got people from the softer sciences and people from the harder sciences, older, younger, more experienced, less experienced. It's really trying to kind of create that mix. The second thing is that because we've been operating globally, we've had to adjust our preconceptions so often. From working for the state of Hawaii to in the desert of Saudi Arabia, and that causes you to have a different approach to each project that you're doing. So at the beginning of the project, I think the only thing that we're really doing for months is asking questions. And one of the very first things that we're trying to figure out is we're trying to figure what we call a stakeholder network. So we go to a project and then we try to investigate who are the spiders in the web of the communities that are operational there, both from a legislative perspective, as in just the people that literally live there, finance, infrastructure, and so on. And then we systemically go through conversations with them to try to figure out where they stand, where their ethical boundaries are, what their perspective on sustainability is. And then, using the SID framework, which is agnostic. You know, it's entirely agnostic. It doesn't tell you what to do ever. It just helps you to unravel the state of the system that you're currently facing. so that you can communicate with others about it and can understand what kind of possibilities you have for intervention. So with that system and all the stakeholders and using that process, I think we get pretty far in keeping that challenge to be right front and center everywhere we go.
Yes, in one of the interviews, you explained that, or you discuss the concept of natural capital. And I think you use your SIT framework to value natural capital. But you also explained that you leave room for values that appear in the future. How do you do it? It's magical.
Yeah, so that really does depend a little bit on what kind of project you have in front of you. For example, we did a very interesting research project on investigating the broad systemic societal value of soil. And now, if you say the word soil to a lot of people, and they'll say soil, how can that be that important? But it's actually very interesting. There are scientists around the world that are increasingly saying that soil is one of those places where a lot of indicators for sustainability and healthy and happy futures and biodiversity and all of them all come together inside of soil health. So investigating how the quality of soil impacts through our society, from land value to agricultural production, from water retention and biodiversity to literally having cleaner and healthy environments because there's less pollutants in the air, which is, as science is now discovering, that soil is actually the major air pollution cleaner. It's not so much the plants, it's the soil that does it. The plants just transfer it to the soil, and they're in the soil, the fungi and all those micro ecosystems. They really do the processing. So in that project, you get these huge networks of different value items, and then each value item has to be investigated to see how you could possibly value it. And value is not necessarily money, but if you can express it in money, it will help a lot. So that's usually the ethical debate within natural capital. Is can you put financial value on everything, which is what natural capital is trying to do. And what I really liked was at the Natural Capital Conference in, I believe it was Edinburgh a few years ago, the head of the Bank of Scotland came out, and he had a very salient and very sharp perspective on it. And his argument was, if you don't give it a value, it has no value. And that sounds very harsh because, of course, it has value. It has emotional value, it has historical value, it has cultural value, it has intrinsic value, all those values that cannot be expressed in money. But from an economic perspective, if you want to safeguard something, if I have a very large piece of rainforest and I'm saying it's invaluable, we can't put a price on it, and someone comes along and cuts down part of it, and he says, well, there's no price on it, so, I mean, I damaged it, oh, sorry, and then walks away. But if you put $100 billion on it from the beginning, then if it gets damaged, it's like, well, you better fork up those billions to prevent it. So it's not as if that's your belief that everything should be expressed in money, but it's a mechanism that works within the system of our society to make things possible and other things impossible. So basically, with it, you draft a landscape where companies and governments can navigate through by putting a very high price and arguing it very well why nature, also raw nature, and not just talking about productive nature, but just, completely untouched and preserved natural areas, why they are extremely valuable. And if you say it's a billion per square kilometer or 10 billion per square kilometer, every euro or dollar you can add to that will help to protect and safeguard its future. And so from that perspective, I'm quite a big proponent of the natural capital movement. I do think that most countries would really do well in keeping a yearly profit and loss balance sheet on their natural capital. And I'm not just talking about blunt, this many kilometers, but also qualitative, the level of quality, so you don't cut down an old growth forest and then plant some new little sapling somewhere else and say, yeah, well, we've cut down a square kilometer of that and we gave back a square kilometer of young forest, because they're nowhere near the same thing. So that's something that within regulatory frameworks, they've come pretty far. And I really like that. And the Netherlands has something called the Natural Capital Atlas, which is freely communicating a lot of data about this that can be used by governments or companies at the same time. It's not a movement that I feel has gotten as much attention as it should have. In the Netherlands, I think circularity is the sustainability movement that's really kind of winning the trendy race, which is very nice and very important. Circularity is wonderful, but it's also just an evolution of recycling. I mean, it mostly focuses on energy and material loops and their associated business models, which is all nice. But the ecological world, the importance of biodiversity, which is probably the most irreversible and therefore most important global asset that we have, which is crashing down like never seen before, causing a giant extinction event that we hear about in the newspapers once or twice a year, and then everyone just goes like, oh, that's bad, and then goes on with their business, right? I mean, there are organizations that are working on biodiversity loss and ecosystem restoration, but it's very small compared to those working on renewable energy and circularity, which is crooked. It should be the other way around.
Exactly. Totally agree. How is artificial intelligence helping you in this respect? You say that the ability to understand our input is spectacular. What would be a good example to take us by the hand in this opportunities that artificial intelligence give us?
Yeah, so artificial intelligence, I like to think about it in the broad term, because if you really go like to in a narrow definition of things like machine learning, to me those are just tools. It sounds great. It's a very trendy buzzword, artificial intelligence, and machine learning is absolutely great, and it's a fascinating thing. But it's also just a tool, like a pen, and like a lawnmower. You use it for what it's good at, and you shouldn't use it for things that it isn't. For us, we are in the process of implementing artificial intelligence modules in that software that I mentioned earlier, which means that, let's say, okay, so the software allows you to make, for example, energy and material flow model of the city of Amsterdam. So all the houses would be represented by a block, all the energy sources would be represented by a block, all the water sources and so on, and it would show it in kind of one of those flow networky things that you see a lot when you're dealing with circular economy. With arrows going everywhere, and this turns into that. Very visual, very understandable, even from kind of like a high school level, so that's great. And then inside of it are all the numbers. Now, if you model, let's say, an energy material flow system like that of Amsterdam, you can do two things with it. First, you model the reality, like this is more or less what it's like. And then you can make an optimized model where you say, well, this is how we would like it to be in the future. So you create a future-oriented model, and then you can look at, well, what are the differences between them, and how can we transition from one to the other? Now, that sounds fairly straightforward, but then you get into reality, and then you see that, first of all, it's not that easy to make decisions on, okay, so how are we going to change it to optimize the future? Because then you would have to know about pretty much any innovative system that could help to improve that energy material flow system. And you may know a few of them, but there's nobody that knows all of them. So then you need to get a lot of consultants in the room, and they all charge 200 euros an hour, you know, and to bring in their ideas in the brainstorm, and these projections are incredibly expensive. And then it needs to be calculated because there's the feasibility on this and the feasibility on that. So you get into these huge transition projects where a lot of people are sitting around the table in lots of meetings during years and years of decision making. So the software in itself will really help that process, but artificial intelligence in there can really help to, once we have that library of different solutions that we've sourced from everywhere, to do regression analysis. Basically, very quickly calculate hundreds and thousands of variants using the blocks in the library that it has, and try to move towards an optimized state. And I'm talking about an optimized state in the full spectrum of impact. So carbon, finance, maintenance costs, people participatory levels, the amount of jobs that it generates, land area value, water use, energy use, all of those things, all of those important performance factors, which are just really too many for an individual person to keep in their head, let alone a decision-making table with 20 people from different backgrounds. You know, they get lost, they just get lost. So this is one of those ways that within what we call the complex world, which is the reality around us, which we should not oversimplify, because then we throw away opportunities and also miss risk, that within that complexity, artificial intelligence can help us to do heavy labor that goes towards certain points by letting it figure out itself what kind of strategy it will use to optimize towards that certain point. To me, I mean, it sounds a little bit abstract and maybe a little bit boring, but to me, actually working in this field for so long, to see even the promise of such a tool being able, because what we want Simoto to be completely free and online for anyone to use. So we're also talking about, let's say, a developing village in, I don't know, the central Sahara region of Africa or something. Anyone with access to a computer can then start to work on that for their own village, for their own organization, for their own community. And that's what I think will cause a systemic revolution within the sustainability field, where artificial intelligence is basically sneakily in the background, helping you along, but you might not even notice. You just press the optimize button and whoop, it gives you 3 different scenarios, and you're like, well, these seem to be, these seem to be reasonable. And in the background, there's a lot of complexity going on, which you don't have to be confronted with, because it will scare people away, it will make it inaccessible, etc. Sure. So that's what. I mean, on the second thing, I've been myself privately, because I like to draw, and I like to make computer graphics. I've done that since I was very young. I have been working with the artificial intelligence image generators for months now, and I've been learning how it learns, and that's just such a fantastic thing, because what it is really doing is it's holding up a mirror to society to be able to reflect itself in.
I saw a couple of your drawings, and they look really spectacular.
Yeah, they're amazing. But you have to learn about how humanity actually communicates with itself on the internet, because the AI system has no idea. It just learns from looking at pictures on the internet and the associated text around it. And if you just dryly describe what you want to have, you're never going to get it. But if you start communicating the way that we really do as humanity, through covers of magazines and slang words and odd descriptions and weird subculture and that sort of stuff, then you get very quickly towards what you're actually looking for. So you have to relearn how humanity communicates, which is very cool.
Wow. Unfortunately, these Future Now shows are relatively short knowledge updates. Is there something I should have asked, which I didn't?
No, I think we touched upon a lot of different projects. I think maybe for those of you that haven't seen that project yet, I think it's hugely inspiring because it opened just about a year ago and we worked on it for 15 years. Is the Salesforce Park. It's the largest ecosystem rooftop park in the world in the middle of San Francisco, for which we developed the concept. And it was just opened. It's a completely public park with hundreds of trees, but then on the 8th floor of a renovated bus station. So it's a circular project that has been financed entirely through value creation of the surrounding properties and its water retention qualities, which is also unique. So to me, it's very hopeful to see and understand that even in 2005, when we started this project, the arguments worked to have a project like that realized inside one of the most expensive cities that the world knows, and everyone loves it. Now, to me, that's just such a, it paints a smile on my face to talk about it and to show it to people. And often when they look at the picture, is that real? Yeah, it is real. So Google Salesforce Park, and then look at the pictures. And then if you understand that 15, 18 years ago, they were already okay to say yes to a project like that. And if you can imagine, that's a redevelopment. It's not a new building entirely, it's an upgrade of a city area. Then you understand how quickly we could transfer and transition our cities to our beautiful, green, lush environments that are healthy and pleasant to live in, and that are just accessible and affordable for everyone. And yeah, that's the last one I would like to give you.
Thank you, thank you. I could listen to you for hours. So my sincere gratitude for sharing your future thinking with us today. A profound thank you to you and to our viewers of the Future Now show. And we hope to see you again next time.
Thank you, Mario, and also Felix. Thank you so much. It was a real pleasure, and certainly until next time.